Stage 5, that's where we are now, which is called emerging professionalism and advancing advocacy. So if you're going to have all of these programs and services be established to serve people, you have to have individuals who are working in those programs and providing those services. And over the years, that has become a profession. It started out where most of those services were provided by volunteers, many of whom were survivors of crime themselves. Over time, people realized that servicing individuals who've experienced trauma is probably something that people should be educated about. The average advocate, let's say they're working on a domestic violence case, the average advocate has to be cognizant in helping someone create a budget. So they have to be financially knowledgeable. They have to have a little bit of accounting experience, a little bit of math. They have to have an understanding of the effects of trauma on brain and brain functioning. They have to have an understanding of the dynamics of abusive relationships. They have to have an understanding of the psychology involved in that, and also the sociology involved in that, in terms of what our communities say about people who are in abusive relationships and how our communities may or may not do things that support people remaining in abusive relationships or for abuse to happen in the first place. Those advocates also have to have legal knowledge if they're going to do advocacy in the criminal or civil justice systems. They also have to have some sort of idea or knowledge about medical issues if they're dealing with someone who is a victim of sexual assault, and being able to explain to them what a sexual assault exam is going to entail and what those results that come back may or may not say and what they should do with those results. They also have to have the ability to do counseling and to understand what psychological trauma does, not just on brain function, but on to people's emotional core. So you have all of these different expertise areas that you can't assume that someone who walks through the door off the street and wants to volunteer has. And so it has evolved over time from this kind of volunteer thing to kind of a, hourly wage kind of thing, generally low paid, to more of a profession that now oftentimes has educational criteria or training criteria or work experience criteria attached to it in order to be able to work in that field. And that all started right about 1992, 92 would have been the U.S. Department of Justice created a national academy. And the National Academy, people who worked with crime victims could apply. And 25 people, there were 3 sites, and at each site, 25 people from across the country were selected to go. So not very many people, if you think about across the entire country. Maybe 50 people a year were selected to go to the National Academy. And the National Academy you would be sent to a university. So I was sent to Fresno State. And you go to Fresno, I went to Fresno State, and for a week I had college level coursework on everything having to do with victimization. And it was 12-hour days for 5 days. And when I walked out of there, I was certified by I was a National Academy graduate. And that was the first time that professionals were given college level education across all these things happening to crime victims. And that was that beginning of the movement towards professionalizing people working with crime victims. And so you see the National Academy, you see that most programs have training guidelines. You have to go to so many hours of training before they'll allow you to really start working. Most programs have a 40-hour basic kind of advocacy program that they put you through. You see certification at the national level. The National Center for Victims of Crime and the National Organization for Victim Assistance got together and created a certification. It's a professional certification, not an academic certification. So it means that anybody can go, and if they meet the guidelines for the NOVA certification, you can become NOVA certified. And what that means is you can demonstrate that you've had so many hours of training across a whole broad-based level of things. I think there's something like 20 different items. And you can become a specialist, and you can have a specialist certification in domestic violence or child abuse or sexual assault or homicide to demonstrate your level of expertise in those specific crimes. Idaho has discussed having a statewide certification for 7 years now. And the guidelines have been written for the past 5 years. And the problem is finding a home. And so Post was originally going to take on, they said yes, they'd take on the certification, and it's really just paperwork. And then there was a change at Post, and then Post wasn't going to do it, and then maybe occupational licensing, kind of like they do for physical therapists and occupational therapists, they said, well, maybe we'll do it, and then they're not doing it. So we don't have certification yet. We have had people who have taken an exam for the last 7 years who are waiting to get certified, but we're just trying to find an agency who would be willing to take that on. And it seemed like it would be much easier than it actually is. What we've done, how people actually get to take an exam is the National Academy. We took the National Academy and we created an Idaho Academy. So we have the Idaho Academy, or Idaho, IVAA, Idaho Victim Assistance Academy. And it occurs every June. And professionals around the state apply. We select 25 every year. They're prosecutors, police officers, nurses, counselors, religious leaders, probation officers, victim witness coordinators, domestic violence advocates, sexual assault advocates, and we select 25 of them across all those different disciplines, so we have a good mix. And they come here to Boise State, and they spend a week here at Boise State, and so we've kind of mimicked the National Academy. We wrote our own curriculum, which is getting turned into a textbook next year. And they come here, and we have faculty from U of I, ISU, and BSU who all come and teach the sessions. And at the end, they can choose to take an exam so that when certification comes along, they actually can say, I passed the exam. We have a basic academy for people who have 5 years or less experience. We have an advanced academy for people who have more than 5 years experience. And we have a team academy, and we are the only state in the country that has a team academy. And the team academy requires jurisdictional teams to apply. So for example, if you were in Nampa, you would have a police officer, a prosecutor, a victim witness coordinator, a community advocate working at a community-based program not involved in the system, and then you could have one person that you could fill in with whoever you wanted, a counselor or a judge or a probation officer, whoever. And you would apply as a team. And then we select 5 teams from around the state, and they come here and they do a 3-day version of the academy, both a mix of the basic and the advanced. And they work on creating, if they don't have one, or strengthening, if they do, a coordinated community response to crime. And so by the time they leave here, they have documents and they have foundational things set in place so that when they go back to their communities, they can hit the ground running in creating that community response in a coordinated fashion. College degrees. When I say only at a handful of institutions, I really mean at only a handful of institutions. There are, if you are talking about an undergraduate certificate, kind of like an associate's degree, there are probably 6 of them in the country. If you're talking about a bachelor's degree, there's fewer than that. There's probably 3. If you're talking about just a certificate, and so like if you were an undergraduate student, you could go and you could get a certificate, then there are probably 10. If you are talking about a graduate degree, there's 1. If you're talking about a graduate certificate, meaning in between a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, so you have to have a bachelor's degree to get it, there are 2. One is at UMass Lowell, so out in Massachusetts, and one is now here at Boise State. And it starts in the fall. It's completely online. It takes 1 year, 16 credits, and that's why we're filming, because the last 1 credit class is this, and so people online will be watching this year's sessions to get their 1 credit, and taught by all BSU faculty from the Department of Criminal Justice. And it's geared towards everybody that would come to the Idaho Victim Assistance Academy. That's what the graduate certificate is for. And it's to allow people to then go out into the work community and apply for jobs and say, I can demonstrate to you that I have some expertise in working and responding to crime victims. And here it is, and here's my graduate certificate. The great thing is that we're in the process right now of working with NOVA, the National Organization for Victim Assistance, that offers the professional certification, to meld the 2 together, so that the graduates of our graduate certificate program will meet all of the requirements to get a professional certification at the basic level and to be certified across 3 specialist expertise levels. So they'll then have additional certifications on top of it that they can then go to employers to show their expertise in responding to crime victims. The last piece of stage 5 is advancing advocacy. And really everything that was in place by the early 1990s, late 80s, just got bigger. Individual programs got bigger. More programs became available. More funding became available. And we would hope more people were served by all of that. The real push in the last, I would say, 5 years has been for victim services agencies and programs to do more outreach with people that we call underserved populations. Underserved populations include people who live in rural areas who still may have to travel a long distance to get any services. There are still many places in this state that, for example, if a woman is a victim of domestic violence, that they may have to travel 100 or more miles to get a shelter. Take their kids, move, leave, and go to some place that they've never been before, and then have to drive 100 miles to get there. And then what if you don't have a car, or you don't have anybody to take you, or there is no program in your area where someone could drive you there? And we still have places in Idaho that are like that don't have any services. So rural people are generally considered an underserved population. Teens are underserved populations. LGBTQ, underserved populations. People of color, underserved populations. People of low economic status, underserved populations. And so that the charge has really been for victim service agencies to get out into their community and actually look for victims, as opposed to waiting for victims to come to them, to get out there and make their services known to everybody so that people will know that there's a place to go to. Or if they don't, somebody close to them is going to know that there's a place to go to. And victim services agencies have not been really good at doing outreach. They've not been really good at publicizing services. And so that has been an area for improvement.